Okay, this is the screencast on Beowulf. This will be the first in a series of screencasts on Beowulf because it's significantly longer. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of Beowulf, a little bit about the historical context, some of the Christian connotations, and talk about the Germanic influence in the poem. And then I'll start breaking down the poem itself in subsequent screencast. So Beowulf is generally considered to be the earliest major work of English poetry. We talked about Cadman's Hymn being the earliest surviving shorter piece of English poetry, but this is generally considered to be the earliest major work of English poetry. Dates is somewhere between 700 and 1100 AD. And the origins really are unclear. It was once kind of believed that Beowulf could have been the work of one poet, or perhaps it was the work of multiple poets. Perhaps it's descended from oral storytelling, that kind of thing. But now it's widely believed that it was the work of one poet who was a Christian, and and then a lot of those Christian traditions are represented or reflected in the poem. It was likely passed down in the beginning by Shopes, who were the Germanic traveling storytellers, traveling poets, and they would travel from town to town to entertain crowds with stories and songs and poems and then, a lot of the poem, obviously, the poem is fictional. The characters of Beowulf, Grendel, Grendel's mother, the dragon, are all fictional, obviously, but it seems to have some historical roots. The kings Hrothgar, Hygelac, and Onela were all real men in British history. Well, actually, technically, this is like Scandinavian history. So they were all real men. Set in Scandinavia, which today is Denmark and Sweden. And the story is divided into three distinct parts. So you have the great and noble warrior Beowulf and three stages of his life story. So the first part is when Beowulf is a young warrior, when he defeats the monsters Grendel and Grendel's mother and saves the Danish kingdom. And then the second part is when Beowulf returns home after his victory and becomes the king of his own people in Gateland, and then the third part is his final battle to protect his kingdom when he's an old man, and from a dragon. And so there was no title included in the original manuscript. It was added after the fact, which was common at the time period. It was added later by scholars after it was transcribed and whatnot. The original manuscript is now owned, or has been owned quite some time by the British Library in London, and it was damaged in a fire in 1731. It was the same fire that got a hold of Cadman's Hymn, and anyway, it destroyed a lot of priceless works of early British literature. And as a result, many of the pages are brittle and burned and illegible. You can't read them, but you can view that the original manuscript there in the British Library in London. I want to talk a little bit about the whole idea of the Christian um, religion. Christianity was spreading during this time period, the Great Crusades, and the original tribes, the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes, they came over in the fourth century to they invaded Britain in the fourth century, and they brought with them, their own language and their own religions, and a lot of those tribes worshiped deities. They were pagans, and so the spread of Christianity had just really kind of started to begin around about this time period. But there are a lot of things in the poem that make us think that the writer was a Christian. So there's several Christian connotations, and I'm just going to kind of talk about them really quickly. The Danish king Hrothgar, his poet, at the very beginning, is singing a song about the creation, eerily reminiscent of Cadman's Hymn, there in lines 87 through 98. The monster Grendel in the poem is said to be a descendant of Cain, and so the story goes from the Bible where Cain and Abel, they're brothers, and They're the sons of Adam and Eve. And Cain was jealous of Abel because Abel was inherently good, and everybody loved Abel, right? And so Cain was jealous, and so Cain slays his brother, and as a result, he has to wear the mark of slaying his brother. It's called the mark of the beast, and I'm not going to go on to all of that, but the monster Grendel is said to be a descendant of Cain. There are a lot of allusions to God's judgment and to fate, which is called weird in the old English language. It's Wyrd, not weird, like you're so weird, don't be weird, right? But there are none to pagan deities except for a prayer when the Danish people are tormented by Grendel in their kingdom. They fruitlessly pray to their pagan deities, and no help arrives for them as a result of their praying to the pagans. There are no obvious references to the New Testament. However, Rothgar and Beowulf often speak of God as though they have a monotheistic or a belief in one God religion. Um, and those are all things that are present in the text that kind of give us the impression that it was written by a Christian author. The second thing that I want to talk about is the values of the Germanic people and the Germanic heroes. So these Germanic people, they believed very strongly in um, the kinsmen, and paying loyalty to your kinsmen, to your lord. And they really treated that relationship very sacred. There was a sacred relationship between the warrior and his lord. And it wasn't a servant master kind of relationship. It was a relationship that was built on mutual trust and respect. And so what they would do would be to they would the warrior would swear fealty or swear a code of loyalty to their master. It's called Connotations. And it's basically like a warrior code where they kind of pledge their fealty, their loyalty to their lord, to protect him, to fight his battles for him. And in return, the master, the lord, would pledge reward and wealth and land and whatever he had at his disposal in return for the warrior services. So it was not like a master, you do this for your master kind of thing. It was a mutual relationship that they had. The second value that's present that's Germanic in nature is the idea of the Verb Guild. So the Verb Guild was like a man payment is what it basically loosely translates to. And so this man payment um, is an interesting concept. So we hear talk about class differentiation and structure or whatever. You have your lower class, your middle class. So every man had a value based off of his class structure, where he fell in that, or that rank, I guess I should say, in society. And so they had a value for their life. Okay, so obviously someone in the lower classes or lower ranks would have a less of a value than say somebody up in the higher ranks in society, like kingsmen and lords and that kind of thing. So if you were to kill a kinsman, um, the Verb Guild would be the payment that you exact from the slayer. Okay, and that payment would be taken in exchange for the man's life, and they did that for two reasons. The first reason was obviously for revenge, right? You killed my my guy, I'm gonna kill you, and it's gonna even out the balance. It's all about the balance, right? But the second thing that they did it for was to prevent future killings from happening. So once it was done, say I kill you, I pay your family the value of your life, your Verb Guild, and then you can no longer take in the system of honor, right? You can no longer exact revenge on me because I was balancing things out. You killed me, or I killed you. I paid your family for the value of your life, and then we're done with that. And so it was such an interesting, it's such a kind of an interesting thing because they didn't really have any legal code other than these customs, right? So there were no law enforcement. It was there was no courts where they would go and like battle it out. This was just the way of things. So that Vergil is a very important idea. Um, that plays a big role in when Grendel slays um, uh, the king's men and the monsters. Obviously, you can't. There's no value on their life, and so. But when Grendel's mom comes and she takes Lord Asher, who is like Hrothgar's most beloved man, Beowulf goes to kill the mother, Grendel's mother, to exact that man payment, a life for a life, right? So that idea is a really interesting thing value from Germanic times. So the poem itself is over 3,000 lines long. It's composed in Old English. It's written in an unrhymed four-beat alliterative verse. And then I gave you selection. Obviously, we're not going to trog through like 3,000 lines of poetry, but I did make several selections, and I'm going to be picking up in our next screencast. We're going to get right into the text in the first part of the selection that I made for you, which is when Harrowit is attacked, and I'll pick that up in the next screencast.